For more content like tonight's episode, make sure you check out the Al Nicoletti Facebook business page, the Al Nicoletti personal page, the YouTube channel under Al Nicoletti, and all the past episodes on iTunes and Spotify under the Al Nicoletti Show. I have all the great content out there with past guests, amazing guests that have been on the Al Nicoletti Show. So make sure you check it out. It's everywhere on Instagram at Attorney Nicoletti, and we are going to dive in on the show. Hey, everybody. My name is Al Nicoletti. I'm an attorney here in Florida, and welcome to the Al Nicoletti Show, where I bring on real estate super investors, rising rock stars, movers and shakers, and leaders of clubs in the community that educate, entertain, and inspire all things Florida real estate on how you could take your company to the next level. On the show today, I have Nate Hare from New View Trust. Everybody loves this whole self-directed IRA thing, so I thought it was a no-brainer to have Nate on the show. I don't have it myself. I don't have a self-directed IRA, but people love using the IRAs for real estate investing. And one of the best things about New View Trust is they can help you with that. If you have an IRA, they can help tap into that market and get you in real estate investing with the self-directed IRA. So we're going to talk about the power of self-directed IRAs and just a little backstory on Nate and how I got him here to the show. Jax Ria now has a new platform. They have a new curriculum, and they've been doing a lot of vendor palooza, which is where the corporate sponsors every quarter come in and they set up a booth and they actually get more interactive with the corporate sponsors to talk a little bit more about what they do. And at the last vendor palooza, we had two panels, and I sat on the second panel with Nate. I met Nate beforehand because Brian Martinez is the one that's always at the Jax Ria events, but Nate is the sales guy that's also here. And so Nate got up on the panel. I spoke, Nate went, and somebody asked a question about IRAs, and Nate let it rip. I mean, I was even looking at like, this guy knows a ton about self-directed IRAs and what you could do with it, whether it's health expenses or health stuff or educational stuff. It is incredible. And we're going to dive in and he's going to tell you all about it. But I loved everything he said on stage, and it was a total no-brainer to bring him here. So just a little bit about Nate Hare. I have to talk about my guest because it's so important to know a little bit of the background in case we don't get to it. At least you have an idea of what this guest is. This is big if you love the self-directed IRA. He serves as the director of retail sales at New View Trust, and he oversees the entire retail sales department. He's a part of a 6-member executive leadership team at New View Trust. He's doing all this stuff, and they're based out of Orlando, and he has extensive experience in real estate, lending, business development, marketing, and public speaking. He has 10 years of experience in the self-directed IRA industry and holds a designation of Certified IRA Services Professional from the American Banking Association. We're going to talk about that designation. I know Nate's ready to dive in. I see him backstage. But he was in the whole mortgage industry before all of this for about 7 years. He was at a whole bunch of different places. And he's been an active real estate investor since 2002 and has his license with Keller Williams. And I have to talk about his accomplishments. It's amazing when I ask people to, hey, let's share some of this stuff that you have and what are the accolades that you have in the resume. And he was named to the top 100 people in finance for 2019. He was featured on the SDIRA article in the U.S. News and World Report. He was featured on Fox Morning San Antonio. He was featured on Success in Real Estate Radio. And he's featured in the SDIRA article in U.S. News World Report. And he's got a whole bunch of stuff I love this resume. I think this is incredible. I love having a guest like this. And the bottom line, we're going to dive in on how we can get deep into self-directed IRAs and how you can use the IRA into real estate investing. And on the show, specifically, we're going to talk about how can real estate investors eliminate paying capital gains tax and build more generational wealth through real estate investing. And number 2, how can people who don't have an IRA benefit from a self-directed IRA? If you don't have it, how can you still benefit from it? That's a great topic right there. And can self-directed accounts help investors pay for current household needs like health expenses, educational expenses, or are they just retirement vehicles? We're ready to dive in. Welcome to the show, Nate Hare. I can't wait to dive in all this stuff. I feel like all I got to do is just say, what's an IRA? I could stand up, leave. I'll come back an hour later. Everybody's learned something new. So Nate, welcome.
Well, thanks, Al. Thanks for having me. You are a delight. It was great to meet you at Jax RIA, and I'll try to match your energy talking about retirement, but I promise I can make it fun.
You can make it fun. I mean, that's why I have you, because you made it really interesting. I think there were like 5-6 people that said, wow, out loud when you were talking about what you could do with the self-directed IRA. So I think it's critical that people know what you can use and how you can use it for investing. So just tell everybody, who are you? Where did you come from? A little background of before you were in real estate and where you are today.
Sure. So I got into real estate right out of college. I always wanted to be a real estate investor. I didn't know what it took to be a real estate investor. So I just figured, well, let me go to real estate school. Went to real estate school, found out real quick that was really just training you to be a real estate agent. And I was never the type to show cupboards and cabinets. But I love the numbers. I love the money that was being made in real estate. So that landed me in the mortgage industry. So that's where I got my first taste of real estate, was on the lending side of it. Had a really good, successful career in lending. Bought and sold my own real estate, ended up having about 17, 18 rental properties at one point. And then the crash hit, right? And I learned a lot of valuable lessons through the crash. And through those lessons, I really had to step back and look at how I was investing in real estate, because I really felt that, the crash was a good learning lesson for a lot of us. And what I actually found is that when it came to taxation and capital gains and all the things that I was doing before, that I didn't have the knowledge that I thought that I needed to eliminate taxes from my life. Because the most successful investors are not the ones that make the most money. The most successful investors are the ones that find out the way to keep more money. And so I went on this journey, and I, by accident, found this company that managed self-directed IRAs. I had never even heard of a self-directed IRA. It took me about 30 days to wrap my head around it. The fact that you can buy and sell real estate, you can do lending out of a self-directed IRA, which I actually do, and we could talk about that through the show. But basically what happened is about 10, 12 years after being in real estate was the first time I heard about self-directed IRAs. And I truthfully became mad because I thought, what have I been doing? Why haven't I heard this information? Why did I not know that this was an option in my retirement account? Why did I just think IRAs and 401ks were meant for stocks? And I found that I wasn't the only one. 95% of Americans just believe you can buy stocks and bonds and mutual funds, and they think that's their only investment option. So I really became passionate about the self-directed IRA space because it's not really like I'm selling anything. I'm just giving people information that most people don't know. You don't learn it in school. And I'm just trying to share what I've learned about self-directed IRAs. And I've seen it make life-changing events to people's lives, especially in the real estate community.
Incredible. Can you tell everybody, so we have just a basis for where we're heading into this? What is an IRA? What are the different types of IRAs? And what are some of the pitfalls, the benefits to each one?
So there's several different types of IRAs. If we break it down real simply, an IRA is an individual retirement account. Individual retirement accounts are what the government has given us as an opportunity to help save for retirement. And the way that they help us save for retirement is by eliminating any capital gains tax on our investments. So basically, it's a trade-off. They don't want everybody on Social Security by the time they retire. So the government says, here's these accounts. If you'll put some money in these accounts, they're defined as tax-exempt trusts, all of them. They all have their own tax benefits. And they say, if you keep money in here and you invest in here, you won't have to pay any capital gains tax on your investments. Now, there's several different types of IRAs. You talk about the traditional IRA, the Roth IRA, the SEP IRA, the simple IRA, the 401k, the HSA, the ESA. These are all accounts that have tax advantages to them. Some work better than others, depending on the type of your investment you're making. I'm a big fan of the ones that grow completely tax-free when you take distributions. And we could talk a little bit about that. But real simply, an IRA is a tax-exempt trust that you get to pick the investments, and it grows completely tax-free, no capital gains tax, and it works wonderful for real estate investors.
Incredible. I know at the Vendorpalooza, one of the things you said, you love the Roth IRA. Why?
So with the Roth IRA is a really, really phenomenal tool. And a lot of people are keen to it, but it's actually not as well known as or well understood, I think, than you think. Let me explain a traditional IRA first, because we can compare it. Most people are familiar with a traditional IRA. That's when you put money into it, you get a tax deduction that year, get to write it off on your taxes, and then you can grow it tax deferred. But when you start taking distributions in retirement, you pay taxes on the distributions. With the Roth IRA, it's the polar opposite. When you put money into a Roth IRA, you don't get a tax deduction. But the trade-off is all of the growth is completely tax-free. And by the time that you take distributions out of a Roth IRA, as long as you meet two criteria, you're above the age of 59 and a half, and you've had the Roth IRA open for 5 years, every distribution for the rest of your life is tax-free and penalty-free. So if you're somebody that can take a small amount of money and make it larger, what size bucket would you rather pay taxes on? The small one or the big one? I'm a numbers guy. I would rather pay taxes on the small bucket than the bigger bucket, but it really comes down to what you're investing in. And this is the real powerful thing with the Roth IRA and real estate. I have clients that have managed to accumulate, say, and purchase property within their Roth IRA, 10, 12 rental properties, let's say. And by the time they retire, those rental properties owned in the Roth IRA are completely rented, they're still appreciating, but the client gets to take distributions of that income monthly for the rest of their life and never have to pay a dime of taxes again. They're off the grid. Uncle Sam can't touch them. It's tax-free distributions to the day you die, and even better, when you pass away, those Roth IRAs turn into inherited Roth IRAs that give tax-free income to your next generation for at least another 10 years.
Yeah. So the whole idea is trying to eliminate the taxes, and you can invest in real estate using this IRA, and therefore you can defer the tax. You may never even have to pay the tax. You just keep deferring it away. So, and it benefits to have the Roth, because a lot of people don't understand about the whole thing with the Roth. It's deferred tax. But, and I know you wanted to talk about it, but let's just talk about it for a second. At Vendorpalooza, you mentioned how you can lend out of your IRA, right? I mean, I didn't even know that you can do that. Everybody can be like their own lender out of your IRA. What do you mean?
So that is actually one of the most popular investment strategies in a self-directed IRA. So first, let me just back up just a little bit. Self-directed IRA, when we talk about self-directed IRA for the audience, self-direct is just a marketing term. It's not a type of IRA. It just means you have to find the investment. And when you look at the IRS rules, the IRS does not dictate what we are allowed to invest in. They only tell us what we're not allowed to invest in, and the list is real short. Life insurance contracts and collectibles. Those are the only two investments you can't do in an IRA. So if you wanted to own real estate, you can own real estate. You just have to find a company like NewView that's willing to manage that asset. But most people are not by trade real estate investors. We have 11,000 clients at NewView, and very few of them are full-time real estate investors. But they like the opportunity to invest in real estate passively, and a lot of them do it through lending. And that's actually what I do. My background's lending, so I understand lending. I go to a lot of RIAs, Jack's RIA. I meet a lot of real estate investors. They're the ones out finding deals, and they're always looking for ways to get capital. My capital is my Roth IRA, my health savings account, and my education savings accounts for my nieces. So what I like to do is I like to lend that money out so that when the borrower pays back, they're not paying back me, the taxpayer. They're paying back my Roth, my HSA, my ESAs, and it's completely tax-free. And the only difference in how to do that is you just list your IRAs on the promissory note and have NewView manage that investment. So it's a great way to take what you've already saved up for, invest it in something that's in your community, invest it with someone that you may know or trust. And here's the other cool thing, and a lot of people don't talk about this because everyone's always talking about the numbers and how much they make on real estate. You know, for me, investing in through a promissory note to a real estate investor, it's not just about the double-digit returns I can get. It's about what the real estate investor is doing with my money. They're going out and buying eyesores in the neighborhood, you know, pre-foreclosures, properties that are vacant for 2 years, gutters falling down, grass is overgrown. They're taking my money and they're hiring contractors. They're hiring subcontractors. They're putting my money back into local businesses to turn this eyesore into a nice house, rehabbed, and then sell the American dream of homeownership to somebody. And then I get my money back with my interest. And I think, wow, that felt a lot better than me investing in my mutual fund. It means something more to me. So that's something that I think is a lot of people don't talk about is the social implications of your investing. And when you have a self-directed IRA and you have the ability to lend, I can lend in specific communities, the communities that I live, work, and play in. So it's a two-sided coin. It's yes, I understand the investment, I make good returns, but I'm also doing something positive to my community.
Got it. So Nate, tell us a little bit about the different types of real estate investments you can make with the IRA. Like I know there's investors out there that'll use it to buy tax deeds, or they'll. I know there's different companies that have talked about it where if you're out in Texas, you can use it for the oil and gas industry, or weird little things like that. Give us a list of the different types of real estate niches that you can use the self-directed IRA with.
Sure. So the most common ones would probably be just your traditional, rental property. Somebody has a rental property in their neighborhood. They want to buy it using their retirement funds. I just had a client actually today fund a deal where they funded it with, they partnered their traditional IRA, their Roth IRA, their spouse's traditional IRA, and their spouse's Roth IRA. All four IRAs jointly now own a rental property. So that's kind of one of the most common ones. You do see people pool money together. A lot of times this is on the other side of it, maybe somebody who's putting together a syndication or raising money to buy an apartment building. You'd be surprised that as many apartment buildings that you drive by or commercial property that are actually funded with retirement accounts. A lot of people raise money through other people's retirement accounts. So that's another way to invest in real estate, is passively through someone else's investments, through a syndication. Or you can buy land. There's a lot of clients that just buy land and sit on land. Really, in a nutshell, you can do anything you can do real estate related that you could do as an individual, you can do in an IRA. You're just changing the ownership from your name personally to your IRA so that you get the tax benefits. So even when you come down to the creative stuff, like, sure, buying tax deeds, real estate options is a great one that a lot of people don't talk about much. Real estate options, you can take a small amount of money and make potentially large amount of money. I know some people wholesale. There's some cautions with wholesaling in an IRA. I won't get too deep into that. But doing creatives, buying property on terms, buying property subject to the underlying financing. And you can even buy property with just using your IRA as a down payment, where your IRA still owns the property. And there's banks that have financing for your IRA. A lot of people have no idea that there's banks out there that will actually loan money to your IRAs, provided your IRA has a sizable down payment.
Crazy. I mean, this is great stuff for people that don't even know what to do with their IRA, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, you could. So I know we talked about it at the Vendor Palooza about the 401k and how, with the Roth, you're limited to contributions up to $6,000 per year, unless you're playing catch up over a age group. But people don't realize that you can use all of this stuff with the self-directed IRA. Like, can you lend out of your 401k?
You can, yeah. So 401k is just another option. When it's self-directed, it's called a solo 401k or a QRP, qualified retirement plan. It's actually amazing for real estate investors or self-employed individuals, small business owner with no common law employees. The reason why they're so powerful is you can make larger contributions than just traditional IRA and Roth IRA. So I'll give you an example. With QRP, if you're self-employed, contributions up to $19,500, and it can be Roth money. So you can make larger money dumps if you qualify for a 401k, and you can actually contribute up to a total of, with your Roth and traditional in the 401k, you can contribute up to $58,000. So larger money dumps in the employer plans, and they can also be used to lend. They can be used to buy real estate. All 7 accounts can own the same things. And the power is you can partner all your accounts together if you choose to do so. So that's one of the things that I always remind clients. It's not about what you can just put in your one IRA, because you might be limited as to what your buying power is if you're looking at one IRA. But when you start looking at your IRAs, your wife's IRAs, maybe your brother's sisters has IRAs. You look at your health savings account. You look at education savings accounts you can set up for your kids. These are all accounts that can be grouped together and increase your buying power and invest into real estate and have all of the profit completely tax-free.
So just so I make sure we cover the topic tonight of all of this stuff. And I know one of the big things you wanted to talk about was eliminating capital gains tax and build generational wealth. How can real estate investors eliminate paying capital gains tax and build more generational wealth through real estate investing?
So it's what we've been talking about, right? IRAs have no capital gains tax that you have to pay. It just matters, when do you want to pay the tax? Do you want to pay tax later? Because you only pay tax on the distributions, potentially, depending on the type of IRA you have. So if you're really looking to A, eliminate capital gains tax, but then B, pass on more generational wealth, in my opinion, without giving tax or investment advice, I find one of the greatest tools is using Roth IRAs, Roth 401ks, health savings accounts, and education savings accounts, but more the Roth IRAs, because when you start accumulating assets in a Roth IRA, not only do you have to pay no capital gains tax whatsoever, you can buy and sell 100 houses in a Roth IRA and never have to pay a dime in capital gains. So what that benefit is you get to grow that bucket much, much faster than had you been investing that in your personal name, because you're a taxpayer. You lose 40, 50% of taxes every year, so your money grows slow. And that's why I think most people don't have enough in retirement, is because they don't plan ahead, and they spin their wheels through their career trying to keep up with taxation, wondering why they don't have enough money. One of the best ways to have more money is just get Uncle Sam out of your pocket. And using a Roth IRA eliminates capital gains tax on your investments. And once you have qualified distributions, you can live tax-free off the distributions from that Roth IRA with the investment still intact. And the best thing about a Roth IRA or a Roth 401k is that you don't have what's called required minimum distributions. Required minimum distributions are what you have on a traditional IRA or a SEP IRA or a simple IRA, which basically to the age of 72, they IRA and says, hey, remember all those tax deductions you took? Yeah, you owe us, remember? So you have to start distributing those assets so that you pay us. So it's hard to preserve wealth when you're forced to distribute in your lifetime. But with a Roth IRA, you've already paid Uncle Sam. You don't owe Uncle Sam a dime. So there's no required minimum distributions. You can keep the assets growing. And if it's real estate, everybody knows if you hold real estate long enough, it's going to appreciate in value. And even if it doesn't appreciate, you still have rents. And rents are sometimes 8% of the total income for the year. So if you've got income producing property in good areas in an account that will never be taxed, not only do you get to reap the benefits of that tax-free income, but your future generation gets to reap the benefits, because those assets don't go away when you die. They just pass on as an inherited Roth IRA, and your future generation just has to distribute it over at least 10 years in most cases, but that's still another 10 years past the time you've passed that it continues to grow completely tax-free. It's just an amazing tool. I wish they taught this earlier in school. But there's probably a reason they don't teach to everybody, because the IRS likes us to pay taxes.
Yeah, there's a lot of things they don't teach you in school, right? And this is one of them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing that you talked about at Vendorpalooza was the health expenses and educational expense benefits. I think there were people that had questions about when you can do it and what does that mean. So can self-directed accounts help investors pay for current household needs and expenses like healthcare and education?
Yeah, and this one, interestingly enough, this struck a chord. And I don't know, maybe the people just had missed the fact that you can use HSAs, but I had so many people come up to me and ask me about the HSA after that panel. It was great. So when we talk about IRAs, Roth, SEP, simple, traditional, you're going to get your tax benefits at retirement. But people always say, well, what about now? How could I reap the benefits now? There are accounts that can be self-directed that will allow you to take benefit now. One of them is an education savings account. We'll talk about that one first. It's called a Coverdell Education Savings Account. Now, these are accounts that you can set up for your kids or grandkids or just anybody. I've got 2 set up for my nieces. So you can set it up for your children. The contributions are relatively small. It's $2,000 per child per year, but the magic is not in what you put in it. The magic's what you invested in, because they're the only education savings accounts that can be self-directed. So it's different than a 529 plan. A 529 plan, you put money in, but you don't get to invest it. It's a good college savings plan for the most part. But what do you do before college? What do you do for high school expenses, for elementary expenses, kindergarten expenses even? This covered education account is a very little known account that can be used by real estate investors especially to hold investments, buy investments within their covered education account. And I'll give you an example, a real good example of a friend of mine who did one. But when you invest the money in the covered education account, all the profit can be distributed tax-free and penalty-free to pay for qualified out-of-pocket health expenses for that child, for that beneficiary. And those education expenses go from kindergarten all the way through college. So that would be things like tuition, books, uniforms, computers, iPads, even your home internet bill and all cabling is a qualified education expense out of a covered education account. So if you're an investor, if you switch your mindset of paying expenses out of your bill, that's your most expensive bucket of money. If you're paying all your expenses with that money, you got to just keep spinning your wheels trying to create income, to create taxes, to pay expenses. If you just put some money aside in, say, a covered education account, let some of the investments grow there and pay the same expenses you're going to pay anyways, but consume more of it because you get Uncle Sam out of your pocket. So I'll give you an example. A friend of mine in Houston, he did a deal where he put $100 in his son's covered education account. He's a real estate investor by trade, so he was looking to identify a deal, and he found a deal. And the reason he put only $100 in the covered education account is he knew he could tie up a property at least with $100. And he found a property that had a lot of value in it. The purchaser on the contract was the covered education account. It wasn't him. It was the covered education account. The money from the Coverdale was used for the option fee. And then he assigned that option for $40,000 8 weeks later. So the $40,000 goes back to the covered education account and it's completely free of tax. Had he done that investment in his name, he would have lost 50% to Uncle Sam. But the fact that he just did it in a different name, in a different bucket for a different use, now he's got $40,000 of consumable education expenses for that child instead of 20 had he done that in his name. So the covered education account, great tool, especially if you can take a small amount of money, make it larger, and do it tax-free through your real estate investing. And then the health savings account is probably one of the greatest gifts out there known to man, even better than the Roth IRA, some people would say. The health savings account, first, you have to have a high deductible health plan to have a health savings account. It's one of the qualifiers. But if you have a high deductible health plan and you're not dependent on someone's tax returns and you're not on Medicare and you qualify for a HSA, a health savings account is one of the greatest things you can invest. One, when you put money into the health savings account, you get a tax deduction. So it goes in like a traditional. You just put money in, you get a tax deduction. It's a no-brainer. But the money stays in there and you can invest it. Now you can invest this. I partner my HSA with my Roth on real estate investor loans. You could do real estate options. You could buy tax deeds. But the benefit is when you use the HSA, all of the profit to the HSA is completely tax-free and penalty-free and available immediately to pay for qualified out-of-pocket health expenses that your insurance doesn't cover. So that would be things like doctor's visits, acupuncture, prescriptions, eyeglasses, any vision, dental, all the things that Americans pay for anyways, but they're paying it with taxable dollars out of their back pocket. So with the education savings account and the health savings account, if you could just start to identify investments and use those buckets instead of your bucket, you find that there's more money left over to pay for the goods that you need to pay for today, especially with education and healthcare. And we know that that's been on the rise for many, many decades.
See, this is why I had Nate on the show, right? All you got to do is just say educational and health, and he's letting everybody know how you can benefit from using this account and get tax-free deductions or tax-free benefits using this, and it's for your own good, right? So you accumulate all of that compounding interest with the IRA after many years, 30, 40 years, and you're finally able to get it. What is it, 59 and a half? You can finally
59 and a half for most IRAs without the 10% penalty, yeah.
Right. So now what do you do? Right now, this is when you can use it. But there's people out there, Nate, that I know there's some investors that have an IRA and I think they're in their late 30s, 40s that are using the IRA now to do the investing, not waiting until 59 and a half. So we're not talking about waiting all that way and then investing. We're talking about as you can do it as you go, as you're putting your distributions in, as you're making your 401k contributions, as you're doing it as you go. So crazy cool stuff that you could do with this. I didn't know you could do that. How can people benefit with the self-directed IRA if you don't even have one?
So this is a great question. So with real estate, if you are a real estate investor, put your ears on. When you're looking for money to fund deals, there's more places to look than you've probably looked. Now, what I mean by that is most real estate investors are always going to look to, okay, what are the traditional banks going to give me, because I can get, low interest rates there. I can get at least 10 properties, but I got to come in with skin in the game, and it's going to be a closing process. So it's good to go to banks sometimes if you can afford and wait for it. But the other option is a lot of real estate investors go hard money. Hard money, nothing against hard money. It's all about where you can get financing. Hard money is going to be quicker in some cases. It's still going to pull your credit. They're still going to look and see if you're a good guy or good gal. But it might be asset based. You might get higher, financing options there. But you're going to pay top dollar, right? You're going to pay high interest rate, high amount of points. In the middle is private money. So private money can be a mix up of just people's money under their mattress, right? Personal money. But the largest bucket of private money is retirement accounts. $30 trillion sits in retirement accounts, 10 trillion in IRAs. The reason I pick out IRAs is because typically in IRA, somebody has more control over that than maybe their company sponsored 401k. So if you're looking for private money, the largest bucket is IRAs. If you can network with enough IRA holders or IRA lenders like myself, or like, a lot of the New View clients that are IRA lenders, typically it doesn't affect your credit. It's a relationship business. So you just have to know people that have IRA funds that are willing to loan to you. And I've seen investors take this and run with it. What I mean by that is if an investor needs cash and they need it fast, you can get it within 1 to 2 days in an IRA if you have the documents and paperwork right. So that's a powerful thing for a real estate investor to come in with cash in 2 days. You're going to win a lot more deals than somebody coming in with a pre-approval letter from their bank. So if you have IRA lenders on standby, you can pick up more properties. But if you are treating your IRA lenders right, if you're making your IRA lenders money and you're paying them back, I've seen it where IRA lenders will continue to lend to you as a borrower if you're a real estate investor. Not only will they continue to lend to you if you're doing right by them, but they're going to talk to other people. They're going to tell their brother. They're going to tell their sister. It's the greatest source of private financing that's probably the most underutilized. And I know investors, thinking off the top of my head, I know a friend of mine that bought in his 5th year in real estate. He really started using more private money than anything. He bought 62 properties in 1 year, all with IRA financing, all from people who had IRAs. He didn't put a single dollar in any of his deals. He got all of his financing from his IRA clients. So he didn't use any of his own money. He didn't have to go to banks. And there's a lot of investors that really have taken that and run with it. Now, it takes a little networking. You can't just go online and go, who wants to give me their retirementmoney.com. There's no website that does that. So you got to go to Jack's RIA. You got to go visit local real estate investor associations where they're keen to this. Come to New View events, shameless plug, but come to New View events where you'll meet clients. But that's a way that people who do not have an IRA could benefit from a self-directed IRA is if you've got investments, realize there's a lot of IRA money, and you just got to start opening that dialogue up to people that might have idle cash sitting in their IRA uninvested.
So great point. So New View hosts events where they have their clients there, and those are clients that they're interested in lending out of their IRA.
Oh, yes. Yes, a lot of them are. Just had a meeting with several of them last night, and they wish they had more opportunities to lend on. Now, the difficult part for us is I can't give a list of the clients that want to lend because we have client confidentiality. I always get hit up at the end of an event. People try, hey, how many beers do I got to buy you to get the list? No, I can't give you the list of the clients. It just takes getting out there and networking. I'll just say we did have our first networking event of the year. 2021 finally opened up. We had it last week. It was a phenomenal event. We had about 100 people show up. And that was just the starter. So I would say if you follow us on Facebook or go to our website, you'll probably find when we do the next quarterly mixer. And they're just great to network, and you always find money. And even if it's not there, just realize 65% of Americans have retirement funds. You just got to keep your radar open for them and start having that dialogue with people about, hey, what's your IRA invested in? Oh, I'm sorry you lost your job. What are you going to do with your 401k? You know, a lot of people have no idea what they're going to do. And if you're an investor and you have an opportunity to get them involved into real estate specifically, and show them how you can take their money and make it secured by the property. Talk about how, you can give them, good above average return, but what you're doing in the community with that money. That's all important stuff. And as long as you can pay your investors back with their interest, they're going to say, thanks. What's the next deal? Let's do that again. That was fun. And so that's really something that investors can take advantage of. And it doesn't take any good credit, doesn't take any income to qualify for those.
I'm amazed at the fact that there's events where there's people ready to lend out of their IRA and they're looking for people. So, Mike, let's just make sure we put the chyrons up for everybody to see. Like, Nate, where are these events taking place? Like, where can people find out about those events? I know you're smiling over there because, like, you know this is a big thing for people, because I feel like there's like 2-3 types of investors. There's the investor that doesn't have the self-directed IRA but wants to know how you can benefit from NewView. There's the investor that has an IRA and wants to use the IRA for either the lending or to get into tax deeds or to do things with rental properties. But then you have the other investor that goes to these conferences and goes to these seminars, and they hear all about how they can invest in real estate and not use any of their money. But when you hear that, you're thinking hard money lending. You're thinking, the banks. You don't have to do all financing. I don't do it, so I don't know the exact types. But now you have another angle for those that don't want to use their money. They're using zero down for anything, but they're getting the backing of somebody that's lending out of their IRA. I didn't know that before. And there's events where people are really willing to do this. I didn't know that either.
I'll throw this out there too, because I do some classes on Wednesday. So I encourage people to join in, because I talk about different strategies. And the cool thing with private lending, because I come from the lending background, the real interesting thing I like is that every deal's different. So you can get really creative with your IRA lenders. For instance, I've done just a lot of just simple interest loans. I've done deals where it made more sense to do what's called a shared appreciation mortgage, where I charged the borrower less of a percent, but I got a little piece of the equity. Even though I was the lender, I got a little piece of equity on the back end. There are some deals that works out better for both parties. There's net profit notes. There's all different ways that you can create a mutually beneficial agreement between you, the real estate investor, and your IRA lender. And if you can figure out how to make win-win scenarios, you're going to have more people that want to lend to you. And if you ask people what they're invested in currently, this is a good way to know what they might be comfortable in earning. For instance, if you ask somebody and they say, I've got my IRA invested into a CD. Okay? Now, CDs are one of these funny investments that they kind of pitch on people as secure, and you don't lose your principal, and will give you a safe below 1% return. Well, especially with inflation now, if you're getting 1% return in your retirement account, you're going broke safely. That's what that's called. So if you could take somebody that's in that investment and they call it secured and they're making 1%, if you even give that person 5% secured by real estate, that's a life-changing event to that person. So it's not that you're begging for money as the real estate investor. You're providing an opportunity to help people retire by giving them better returns than what they're normally getting. So if you can start adding that to your dialogue, hey, what are you invested in? Are you happy with have you ever thought about being a lender secured by real estate and getting higher returns than that? Can I show you how that's done? It might take them a little while to get off the fence, but once they get off the fence and they start earning 10% versus 1%, I guarantee you they're not going back to that certificate of depression.
Yeah, I think once people dive into this whole world, they're going to just keep finding new ways to make it happen, and keep finding new real estate investments, right? I mean, you're depositing the money in the Roth for something. Now you got to use it, and or you just use it later, whatever you want to do. But this is a huge new avenue for people that want to use it for something with private lending and all the health and educational expenses. I see you all listening and watching out there. If you have questions for Nate, we're live on the episode right now. Ask away. I mean, I see we got some questions, but Nate is a wealth of information when it comes to the IRAs. I mean, and self-directed IRAs and anything that you can use with real estate investing. If you have a question, drop it. And Nate, we're going to make sure all the people that are listening and watching reach out to Nate Hare. If you're really interested in this, he will go to town and talk to you about this for an hour. I mean, he'll tell you all the good, the benefits, and what you can do with the self-directed IRA. Nate, I mean, any other tips that you can tell anybody, and the listeners and viewers, investors out there, that you can use with the self-directed IRA?
Yeah. So what I will say is that anybody that has an IRA that has not invested in these what's called alternative assets, real estate, promissory notes, don't think that you have to be a real estate investor to make this profitable to you or make it make sense. Because one of the biggest benefits to having an IRA or self-directed IRA that holds alternative assets is that alternative assets, at the end of the day, most of them are tangible. It really scares me sometimes, especially with the volatility in the markets, when somebody has all of their retirement invested in paper assets, stock certificates that have no collateral base by them. Meaning if you invest in the wrong company, the company goes out of business, you've lost that investment, you've lost all of it. So when it comes to things like real estate, there's a lot of investors, and I will tell you this, they probably don't want their employer knowing. We have clients that work at Charles Schwab. We have clients that work at TD Ameritrade. We have clients that work in the stockbroker field but have self-directed accounts because they want real estate in their portfolio. They know the power of holding tangible assets like real estate that aren't going to evaporate on them. So it's a good diversification tool at anything. So when you're talking about diversification, don't listen to an advisor that's telling you high risk mutual funds, low risk mutual funds, and medium risk mutual funds is diversified. Diversification means having maybe some mutual funds and some paper assets, but having some tangible alternative assets too. And I'll tell you, there's an article in Forbes from March 2020. And in the article, they talk about self-directed IRAs. And one of the most interesting things that I pulled out of that article is that the IRS did a study, and that they, out of all IRAs, all 10 trillion of them, only 2% to 3% of them hold alternative assets. Okay, now the average American family retires with $65,000 in their retirement account. So we're talking 98% of those are those $65,000 IRAs. But of the IRAs valued above $5 million, 25% of the assets are alternative assets in those accounts. So the rich and the wealthy are already keen to this. It's just not shared with the rest of us. So if you're looking for a good diversification tool and add to your portfolio, alternative assets is a great asset, even if you don't have to be a real estate investor by trade to make this stuff work.
Amazing. Nate, why don't we dive into some questions? I know we have some questions here, and we'll pull it up on the screen, but people love talking. It's a popular topic. I knew it was going to be a popular topic when I was going to bring you on. I was like, we haven't talked about the IRAs yet, so let's dive in on some of the questions. Let's get them up there, Mike. Alex Sylvia, is there an age limit for opening a Roth IRA?
Great question. There is no age limit for a Roth IRA. In fact, as long as you have earned income, you can have a Roth IRA. So it doesn't matter how old you are. I'll tell you a quick story real quick. Client of mine, a grandmother, she's a real estate investor by trade. Had a granddaughter many years ago. The granddaughter was 4 at the time, and she had this little book that she would sell to her students. She sold them online, and it was just this little book that was for her coaching. And on the cover of the book was the picture of her granddaughter holding a wad of money with glasses, sitting in front of an old IBM computer. Now, the reason why she put her on there, she was a cute grandchild, obviously, but she paid that grandchild a modeling fee. of $5,000. $5,000 was coincidentally the max Roth IRA contribution that year. So the purpose of it was two-sided. She gave her granddaughter earned income through a modeling fee she paid her, took that $5,000, made a contribution to that granddaughter's Roth IRA, partnered granddaughter's Roth IRA with grandma's Roth IRA, and they partnered to buy a piece of land together. The land was subdivided and they sold off the parcels. And by the time that 4-year-old granddaughter was 9, her Roth IRA was valued at about $75,000. Think how well that grandmother is setting up that granddaughter off in life. And that granddaughter has no idea. That's just a favor grandma did for her using her knowledge as a real estate investor, her knowledge of the Roth IRA, and her knowledge of tax code. Just create the child earned income, put that money into a Roth IRA and invest it.
Incredible story. So, I mean, get started early, right? That's the moral of the story.
Exactly.
Yeah, because it's the compounding effect. You only get that 6,000 contribution, or you get the catch up later, but we're not worried about the later. You get started early, young, and
yeah,
from there. Let's get that next question. So Alex asks, are Roth contributions to a solo QRP able to be personally withdrawn without penalty, similar to Roth IRA?
Yes. So the Roth, so how a QRP works, a QRP, it's a 401k essentially for you as a self-employed individual. And like all 401ks, you have an employee side that makes contribution, and you have employer side where you can make contributions. When you're self-employed, you're both. You're the employee and the employer. So with the employee side, you can make very large contributions. I mentioned this earlier, contributions up to $19,500. And if you're over age 50, you can contribute actually a lot higher, around $26,000. And that can all be Roth money. So it works the same when it comes down to distributions. It grows completely tax-free. As long as it's seasoned 5 years and you're 59 and a half, distributions out of the Roth portion are completely tax-free and penalty-free. So if you're looking to shovel more money in through contributions and you're self-employed, the Roth 401k will allow you to shovel more money in. But really, it's not so much about shoveling money in. It's good to make contributions. It's about what you do with it once it's in there. I do have another friend, again, one of the greatest investments that I've seen. A friend of mine took a $7,000 Roth IRA, $7,000. Found a widow who had inherited 3 warehouse units that her husband was managing, and she just didn't want them. She didn't need the money, but she just wanted to get rid of the headache of the tenants. So what he did is he structured a deal to where he could buy it on terms, carry back a note to her for a $5,000 down payment. So he used the Roth IRA to be the buyer because he only had $7,000 in the Roth. So he took down 3 warehouse units with $7,000 in the Roth IRA, bought on terms, and then 16 months later sold one of the warehouse units, which was enough to pay off the carried back note, and now sits on 2 warehouse units that are owned free and clear in his Roth IRA that are valued above $200,000 that are cash flowing monthly. So you don't need a lot of money to put in there. You just need a skill set and understand how to put deals together, and understanding that if you're going to take a small amount of money and make it larger by a creative deal structure, then use an IRA. Don't pay capital gains tax if you're going to take a small nugget and make it large. It's just a no-brainer to me.
Does NewView do education classes to explain all this?
Yes, every Wednesday I do a webinar at 1 p.m. A live webinar. We do different classes. Well, we should have you on there. So
I'm ready. I will talk about that.
No,
but
yeah.
I mean, I think this is important info people will ask on the show these questions, right? They can get in touch with you and ask. But I mean, there's got to be so much different angles to this that you can learn. I mean, just like the stories that you just explained. I mean, it sounds like NewView will go in depth. I mean, they'll have the webinars on how you could do it, because a lot of it is information. I'm visual. I like to do the task. I like to actually do it and then see what happens, right?
Yeah.
Same thing with this. I mean, you want to be able to dive in and learn this stuff on how you can do it. So fascinating stuff, Nate. And then we got Aaron Munoz. I see you. How can we get in touch with Nate? We're going to make sure we put the chyrons up, Mike. Just keep Aaron. We're going to keep putting up the stuff that how you get in touch with Nate. He's on Facebook. He's part of New View. We have his email address. We'll make sure we just keep dropping it. So we'll make sure you get the info there.
Yeah, email's probably the best way to get a hold of me.
Yeah, we'll make sure we put the email there. Alex is dropping great questions tonight.
Alex, yeah.
Yeah, Alex is on a roll. How can I get involved with real estate investments with a small HSA or ESA?
Again, any strategy you can find that takes small amounts of money makes it larger. So, for instance, I mentioned, my friend that took 7,000 in a Roth and worked that warehouse deal. That could be any account. That could have been HSAs. Think about it, or think about this. Think about if you had 3 kids and you had an HSA, or an ESA for each of them, right? $2,000 per child. He only needed $5,000 for a down payment, but he turned that $5,000 down payment into $200,000. That's college paid for in 16 months on an investment that he put together with his own brain as a real estate investor. But if you do it in an ESA, where the ESA is the buyer, no taxes on any of that. That pays for college right away. It can pay for a lifetime of health expenses if you wanted to do it. So that's the real cool thing about not only the HSA and the ESAs and the Roth, is you can partner different accounts together to maximize the tax benefits and realize that the growth coming back to them can be used for different uses: healthcare expenses, education expenses, and retirement. And then there's some investments where you can pick and choose that might be better in different accounts. So for the ESA, if you're looking to use those accounts and make profit to pay for current expenses, maybe you isolate the investments that pay off today with those accounts, and maybe the investments that pay off later down the road, those are better suited in your Roth IRA because you have time on that. So it becomes kind of a fun game at some point, because you're always looking at each deal going, okay, is this better in my HSA? Is it better in my ESA? Or should I just partner all of them together and get them rolling? So definitely some cool strategies, that we talk about all the time in this nerdy IRA stuff.
And I'm just going to go to an NATE webinar and just watch it there, right? Watch you explain all this stuff, right? Go to Nate's thing, and Nate can explain the whole thing. You got all these different acronyms that I'm like, CISP, HSA, all this stuff. But at the end of the day, these are cool tools that you can learn from New View and from the education that they bring. And I know people are listening and watching. I know how many people find this interesting. I find it very fascinating. Next question we got: are you able to borrow against Roth IRAs or use small amounts for emergencies?
Great question. So with the IRAs, here's the cool thing with a Roth IRA. Now with the Roth IRA, when you put money into it, those are contributions, and they're after-tax contributions, meaning you already paid Uncle Sam on that money. So if you ever needed, as in a crunch, in an emergency, and you needed to take money out, you could take out your contributions out of a Roth IRA tax-free and penalty-free anytime. You don't have to wait until 59 and a half. There's no early withdrawal penalty because you already paid Uncle Sam on that money. So if you put, say, $20,000 in a Roth and it's now worth $50,000, the $20,000 you put in, you could take out tax-free and penalty-free. If you need to take out money beyond that point, you could get taxed and penalized if you take it out as a distribution. But what you can also do one time every 12 calendar months, and this goes with any of your IRAs, one time every 12 calendar months, you could do what's called an indirect rollover, meaning you could take money out of your IRA and you can use it for 60 days. And as long as you put it back into the IRA within 60 days, then you don't have to pay any taxes and penalties on it. So in a crunch, if you needed some money quick, you just need to take it out and put it back in, you can do that. You could take some money out, put some of it back in, and you'd only have to pay taxes on what you didn't put in. But you have that opportunity to do what's called an indirect rollover. Take money out, put it back in within 60 days. So you could do that once every 12 calendar months. But the cool thing with the Roth is that you don't get taxed or penalized on the contributions you take out. Now, on a Roth 401k, though, this is different. With the 401k, the 401k is a tool that you can actually make loans to yourself, just like any other 401k. A lot of people are familiar with this with the 401k. At their job, they get in a crunch, they need to take a loan from their 401k. The QRP, or the solo 401k, allows you to take loans to yourself up to $50,000 or 50% of the value, whichever's less, and then you pay your 401k back with interest. The interest rate's based on prime, and you pay it back over 5 years. So you could take a loan out of the 401k, pay yourself back over 5 years. If it's in an IRA, it just depends on the type of IRA you have, but you could take it out for 60 days if it's an IRA.
Cool stuff. We got Aaron again that asked another great question. Can UBOT, unincorporated business organization trust, own an IRA 401k? If so, does this change anything?
So IRAs are always going to be based on the individual. So it's always linked to you, taxpayer, you with your social security number. As far as entities go and how you invest the IRA, it can be invested into different entities. It can be invested into a trust. But the IRAs are all individual retirement accounts. They're always going to link back to you, the individual taxpayer.
See, so many questions, Nate. This is why you're listening, you're watching. Get in touch with Nate Hare at New View Trust. They have all this stuff. They have webinars, they have seminars, and a whole bunch of things. They have events where the people that have an IRA, a Roth, want to lend. I mean, they want to use that money and lend out. So get in touch with Nate. We've got his email address. And we got another question. Nate, we have a lot of questions on this episode. I have another one here. Are there ways to minimize, Erica, thank you for the question. Are there ways to minimize UDFL tax?
UDFL tax. I'm not familiar with what UDFL tax is, to be honest. And I don't know if she might be referring to UDFI tax. There is a is it UDFI?
Yeah, it's an I, yes.
Okay, got it. Okay, so UDFI tax is unrelated debt financed income tax. So what this tax is, it's a tax that kicks in when tax exempt organizations own debt leveraged property. So tax exempt organizations could be a church, tax exempt organizations can be an IRA because it's a tax exempt trust. So basically, if you take an IRA and let's say that you're going to buy a house, buy a rental property, but you're just going to use a part of the IRA as a down payment and get a loan from a bank. In a situation like that, the IRS says if you're not going to pay 100% cash for the investment, you shouldn't get 100% of the profit tax free. It doesn't make the investment bad. It just turns the IRA into a taxpayer at that point based on the percent that it borrows. Only the amount that's borrowed is subject to tax. So there's different ways to manage this tax because I'm actually a fan of IRAs getting loans because if you use the strategy right and if you're a buy and hold individual, here's kind of what happens with this quote UDFI tax. Basically, let's say you bought a house 30% down, 70% debt leverage. In normal terms, if you get rent checks for $1,000, 30% of it or $300 goes back tax free. $700 you have to share with Uncle Sam. So, but as you hold the property and rent it, your renters are paying down the note and you're hopefully getting appreciation on the property. So over the years, your debt leverage percent shrinks because the value of the property is going up and the principal balance of the note is getting paid down. So if you can hold property long enough, here's the real cool thing with this UDFI tax, because you might pay a little bit of UDFI on the rental income, but when it comes to selling the property, when you sell the property, then you're worried about, okay, what type of capital gains tax am I going to pay? When you sell the property and you have debt on the property, they're not going to look back at what you started with. They only look back at your past 12 months of indebtedness, meaning what was the average the IRA had in debt over the last 12 months. So if you, in a perfect world, if you kept the property all the way until the note was paid off and then owned it another 12 months past that, you'd pay zero capital gains. So you would use the debt to acquire the property and hold it long enough to still get out of the picture with zero capital gains tax. But even if you don't get away from the capital gains tax, when the IRA is now a taxpayer, you get to use depreciation, which you don't often see in an IRA because there's no tax to depreciate against. But when you have UDFI, there is tax. So you can use depreciation to offset it. You can use expenses to offset it. Or here's one cool trick. If you buy debt leveraged property in a 401k or a QRP, there's an exemption to unrelated debt finance income tax. You don't have to pay it. So if you're self-employed and you want to buy debt leveraged property, buy it in your 401k, not your IRA.
I mean, this is the power of Nate Hare right here. I mean, you got him live. If you have more questions, I mean, Nate, this is amazing that people are asking questions. They find the IRA stuff very fascinating. And if you have any more questions, we're live right now. Ask away. Nate, where can people find you? Make sure you drop the phone number, the email, your Facebook, everything.
Yeah, so my email's nhare, so N for Nate, and then Hare, my last name, Hare, at newviewtrust.com. So it's NUVIEW trust.com. Look, I'm on Facebook. You'll see me, the nerdy guy with the glasses. Or if you want to follow us on our Facebook on our NewView site, that's even a better one because that's where we host our live webinars. We do a lot of continuing education. I record some small videos. You could also subscribe to our YouTube channel. We film about 3 videos a day. So if you go to YouTube, just look up NewView Trust Company. You'll see that we're adding more of those. We're ramping up our YouTube page. I've got special videos on top 10 things to consider before being a lender with your IRA, top 5 reasons to buy real estate in an IRA, how to avoid capital gains tax, all the fun, nerdy IRA stuff. And we film about 3 a week and put new ones up there. So YouTube, Facebook, or just if you want to have a conversation with me, I love talking about this stuff. Just email me, nhare@newviewtrust.com.
Hey, Malachi, George, I see you right there. He's got a question. What's the maximum amount you can contribute to your child's IRA yearly?
Yep. So it is the lesser of the income that they report or $6,000. So when it's an IRA, like a traditional or a Roth, I would definitely consider Roth if you're setting them up early. The contribution limit is $6,000 for anyone under 50. So as long as they show $6,000 of earned income, that's the maximum you can contribute. So that's if they have earned income, but then also you could also contribute to their education savings account. There's no age limit on this. They just have to have a social security number. And that's $2,000 per child per year. So if you're really trying to maximize how much buying power you're putting in tax exempt accounts, you want to be looking at contributing to your own accounts, obviously your Roth IRA, your spouse's Roth IRA. If your kids have earned income, contribute to their Roth IRAs. If they're under the age of 18 and they still have education expenses, contribute to their ESAs. If you have a high deductible health plan, contribute to your HSA. If you're self-employed, contribute to your Roth 401k. When you start looking at all these buckets that you can put money into, it really makes buying easier. It makes getting involved in investments easier, and it makes it fun when you get to keep all of the profit and reinvest it without paying taxes annually. And at the same time, using some of the money to pay for education expenses and health expenses if you're using those HSAs and ESAs we talked about.
Incredible stuff, Nate. Well, if anybody doesn't have any more questions, I mean, Nate, thank you so much for being on the show. And again, we're going to make sure we have all your contact info there. Make sure people can get in touch with you. I know so many people love this topic. It is a popular topic, especially how it was at the Vendor Palooza. I think there were like 8 corporate sponsors. And after we had all done our introductions, every question was directed at Nate for the self-directed IRA stuff. And everybody else was like, well, I guess that's it.
I was shocked. I didn't know so many people were interested in this nerdy IRA stuff. So
it's fascinating. Well, Nate, thank you so much again. We'll make sure everybody gets in touch with Nate Hare at NewView Trust. If you like this stuff, if you're interested, if you're already in the game and you want to fine tune it, it sounds like NewView has all the education and webinars and seminars out there for you to get, and they're at your fingertips. So make sure you get in touch with Nate. Nate, final words.
I just want to thank you for having me on. It was a pleasure. I love meeting new faces. I would love to have you on my show too. So we throw that out there. And I just say one thing to the audience is it's never too late or too early to start these accounts. I get that all the time. Oh, I'm this age. It's too late. It's never too late. I've seen people make $200,000 on one investment in 12, 16 months. So it's all about whether or not you want to pay taxes on it. or not. So it's never too early, never too late. And I love having these conversations. So feel free to email me, whether you're a client or not. I'll talk about what you got, and we'll just have a good chat.
Nate, thank you again. I loved having you on here. And yes, I'm in on your show already. Like, we'll schedule it. We'll talk after. And I can't wait.
All right. Thanks, Al. I appreciate you having me on. It was a good time.
Absolutely. I loved it, Nate. Thank you so much. All right, everybody, if you want more content like this that we had with Nate Hare from New View Trust, check out the Al Nicoletti YouTube channel, the Al Nicoletti Facebook business page, and the personal page. I got all the content out there with all the amazing past guests from the Al Nicoletti Show. Check out iTunes and Spotify, where you can listen to it on the road. You have iTunes, you can download it, you can hear all the amazing guests that have been on the show. You can find me on Instagram at Attorney Nicoletti. And of course, there's the show, but then you have all the great content with probate and quiet title, partitions, all the other stuff, all the webinars that talk about all these very interesting real estate, interesting stuff. There's tons of things out there. So make sure you check it out, and I will see you next time on the Al Nicoletti Show. Take care.